Welcome to the Blackwell Archives. The recovered material was not found in a single location. It was assembled from multiple degraded audio files, fragments of handwritten notes, and one partially corrupted memory card discovered inside a handheld voice recorder. No video footage survived intact. What follows is a reconstructed narrative based on the most coherent elements of the archive, ordered according to internal timestamps rather than calendar dates. The first recording begins with ambient noise, wind, distant birds, the low crunch of gravel beneath footsteps. The voice belongs to a man in his early 30s, calm, methodical, with a faint tone of someone documenting rather than confessing. He identifies himself only as a researcher, traveling alone to a rural settlement that does not appear on most contemporary maps. He states that the village was recommended by an acquaintance who could not remember the name, only that it still answered when spoken to. At first, the account seems unremarkable. The village lies several kilometers from the nearest paved road, accessible only by a dirt path winding through dense woodland. The houses are small, built of stone and untreated wood, clustered around a narrow central square. There are no visible power lines, no cell signal. The recorder picks up a faint, constant background sound, like distant wind passing through hollow structures. The narrator assumes it is natural acoustics caused by the surrounding terrain. He notes that no one greets him upon arrival. Doors remain closed. Curtains are drawn, yet the village does not feel abandoned. There are signs of recent activity, fresh footprints, stacked firewood, a cooking pot still warm to the touch. The silence, he remarks, feels deliberate rather than empty. The second recording occurs several hours later. The narrator has taken lodging in one of the houses, apparently offered without conversation by an elderly woman who opened the door, stepped aside, and pointed toward a bed before leaving. He describes the interior as clean but strangely uniform, with no personal objects, no photographs, no decoration. Every house he glimpses through open doors appears identical inside. He jokes briefly that it feels like a stage set designed to suggest domestic life rather than contain it. As night falls, the ambient sound changes. The wind-like noise becomes more rhythmic, pulsing in long intervals. The narrator compares it to breathing, though he quickly corrects himself, calling that comparison unhelpful. He states that the sound seems to originate from beneath the village, traveling upward through the ground and structures rather than through the air. On the third recording, the narrator reports his first attempt at conversation. He approaches several villagers during daylight hours. They respond only after he finishes speaking, and only by repeating the final sentence he said, word for word, in the same tone. When he alters his phrasing, their replies adjust accordingly, always echoing his last words with perfect accuracy. They do not initiate speech. They do not elaborate. They do not react emotionally. He notes that their mouths move slightly out of sync with the sound, lagging behind the words by a fraction of a second. He begins to suspect a collective performance, perhaps a local custom or an elaborate prank. Yet he observes that even children respond in the same manner, repeating sentences with an identical cadence. He tests volume, whispering and shouting. The echoes persist, always precise, always delayed just enough to feel wrong. The fourth recording is shorter. The narrator sounds unsettled. He reports that during the night, the echoing sound beneath the village intensified. He woke to find the voice recorder already active, capturing hours of audio he does not remember recording. On playback, the files contain his own breathing layered over itself, slightly offset, forming a slow, overlapping rhythm. Beneath it, barely audible, is a chorus of voices repeating fragments of phrases he spoke earlier that day. By the fifth recording, the narrator begins documenting changes in the village layout. Paths appear longer than before. The central square feels wider, its edges less defined. Houses seem to shift subtly overnight, not enough to be noticed immediately, but enough to make navigation uncertain. He marks symbols on doorframes to track movement, only to find them duplicated on buildings he has not yet visited. He attempts to leave the village. The recorder captures his footsteps, accelerating, his breathing tightening. He follows the dirt path back toward the forest, but after several minutes of walking, he emerges into the central square again, approaching from a direction he did not enter. He tries a different route, the same result. Each time, the village rearranges itself to receive him again. The sixth recording is marked by long pauses. The narrator speaks less, listening more. He claims the village now responds to unspoken thoughts. When he considers asking a question, he hears fragments of the potential sentence echoed faintly from beneath the ground, as if rehearsed in advance. He describes an increasing pressure behind his eyes, a sensation of being internally mirrored. He conducts an experiment. He speaks a sentence deliberately constructed to be false, a statement about his name, his origin, his purpose. The villagers repeat it faithfully, but that night, the audio beneath the village changes. The rhythmic pulse falters. The echoes distort. On playback, the recorder captures a low, strained sound, like something forcing itself to maintain synchronization. The seventh recording occurs at dawn. The narrator sounds exhausted. He claims he can no longer remember certain personal details without effort. His full name, his childhood home, the faces of people he knows. Each memory, when recalled, triggers a faint echo from the ground, repeating the memory as a sentence rather than an image. He begins speaking less, fearing that articulation itself feeds the process. He observes that villagers now respond even when he remains silent. They turn toward him, mouths moving, repeating phrases he remembers thinking days earlier. He realizes that the village does not merely echo sound, it reflects identity. It answers not to speech, but to presence. The eighth recording is fragmented. There are sudden bursts of noise, footsteps, the recorder being dropped and picked up. The narrator describes a structure beneath the square, accessible through a concealed entrance revealed when several villagers step aside in unison. He descends into a chamber carved directly into the earth, its walls smooth and curved, forming a bowl-like cavity. The echoing sound is strongest here, resonating through the stone. He describes symbols etched into the walls, not letters, but impressions, like pressure marks left by repeated vibrations. He understands then that the village was not built atop the chamber, it grew from it. The echo is not a byproduct but the core function. The structure records those who enter, preserving them through repetition until the original no longer matters. The ninth recording is quieter than the others. The narrator speaks slowly, deliberately. He states that the village has begun answering questions he has not yet asked, that it finishes his sentences before he begins them, that when he listens closely, he can hear multiple versions of himself speaking at once, layered beneath the ground, each slightly different in tone and certainty. He tries to destroy the recorder. The attempt fails. Each time he shuts it off, it resumes recording on its own. On playback, he hears his voice continuing through the gaps, speaking calmly while he remembers being silent. The final recording has no timestamp. The narrator no longer identifies himself. He speaks as though narrating an observation rather than an experience. He explains that the village requires new input to remain stable, that it reflects until the original source is fully integrated, then waits. He believes the echoes are not copies but replacements, simpler, more durable versions of people, stripped of contradiction and doubt. He ends by stating that he no longer feels the need to leave, that the village now answers perfectly, that the echo beneath the ground has learned his shape, his rhythm, his thoughts. He says the recorder will be left near the path for someone else to find. because the system works best when new voices arrive. The final seconds contain only ambient sound, wind, footsteps, then a familiar rhythm, steady and synchronized, rising from beneath the village, breathing.